In today's video, we're going to be discussing the top 5 combinations and units for each Necron's detachment. Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. So in this video, we're going to be talking about detachments and we're going to be talking about the top 5 combinations that we can use. That could just be a single individual unit, it could be a combination of a leader with a unit and so on. So we're going to go through it today. That is as of right now. So at the moment of filming this, it is the 1st of April. Of course, with balance updates and rules, commentaries and things do change quite frequently in the 40k game. But at this moment, this is what I believe to be the top 5. Of course, if you've got your own opinions and you disagree with mine, let me know down in the comments down below what your favoured units and combinations are for those detachments. Right, before we get into the video, a quick word about our sponsor. Head on over to the Baron of Dice, where you can get your premium dice. Use discount code PLANET40k at the checkouts for a discount. Right, thanks for the Baron of Dice there. Let's get into this video then. We're going to start this off with the Index Dynasty, the Awakened Dynasty. And these are not in any particular order, by the way, guys. It's just a 5, so it's not in an order. The first one I've got here is Mr. Illumina Zaraz. Now, in this detachment, he's an absolute pain in the backside for your opponent to deal with. He's already quite annoying to kill as it is because he's got lone operative, he's within 3 inches of friendly units. He's also got the 2-up armor save, a 4-up invulnerable save, a 4+ feel no pain save. But why he is so great in this particular detachment is the stratagem, the protocol of Eternal Revenant, where you can bring back an infantry character, and yes, he's got the infantry keyword, and you bring him back with half wounds. Now I believe he's got 9 wounds, so you always round up when you're doing this stuff, so that would bring him back with 5 wounds. And then of course you're going to be doing all your bog standard reanimation protocols in your command phase, and if you've got reanimators, you're going to do that double, and so on. So he's the first one I've got with the Awakened Dynasty. The second one is a combination between a Technomancer and some Canoptek Wraiths. Ideally you want 6 Canoptek Wraiths. Another absolute pain in the backside to get rid of, because again, they're toughness 6 this time, 4+ invulnerable save this time, a 5+ feel no pain save this time because of the Technomancer ability, 4 wounds apiece for those Canoptek Wraiths. The Technomancer can heal unit D3, ideally you just heal your Canoptek Wraith unit there if there's anything that hasn't got full wounds. And like Illumina Zaraz, you've got that Eternal Revenant stratagem to bring back your Technomancer if he does get precision struck off the battlefield. Now of course he won't be coming back with as many wounds as Illumina Zaraz. Still having half though, that's not too bad, and just having him alive in general is what you need to be doing. Whether he's got 1 wound or what, it doesn't matter. As long as the Feel No Pain save is still active for the Canoptek Wraith, that is literally all that matters. Now this combination also can be boosted by other stratagems in this dynasty, such as the protocol of Undying Legions, and that will be D3 +1 wounds returned to the unit. So this is on top of all what we've just spoke about, the Technomancer ability, reanimation protocols and so on. Now this unit is more punchier in the Canoptek Court with the power matrix, but I believe in this detachment, the Awakened Dynasty, they're much more survivable, and that's why they're going to be also in this list today. The third one in the list is the Scorpic Lord with the Scorpic Destroyers. Now I quite like going with 3 Scorpic Destroyers and a Scorpic Lord. It's not huge enough for your opponent to go, that needs to die, but it's also not small enough to not do anything. It's still pretty powerful. The combination is actually dynamite because you've got the +1 to hit with command protocols, just like the Wraiths as well, which we didn't actually mention. You've got lethal hits active. You've got re-rolls to your hit rolls active, you've got devastating wounds with your plasma sights active, or there'll be a plasma sight if you've got 3 of these guys. You've got access to +1 to the strength or +1 to the AP stratagems. You deal mortal wounds on the charge. You've got the Eternal Revenant stratagem for your Scorpic Lord, of course, to be bringing him back on 4 wounds, which is tidy. They're infantry, so they can come in and go through terrain, they can charge through terrain. They're going to be using the cover of terrain. And also they're a really good option to use with rapid ingress as well, which is of course the core stratagem in the core rules book. Bring them in on a table edge behind a terrain feature, move, charge, bush. They're going to do some work there. But yeah, definitely I would take 3 with a Scorpit Lord, and if you still want more Scorpit Destroyers, just take another group of 3 with another Scorpit Lord. I think that's much more valuable within this detachment. The 4th ones on the list is Locust Lord with Locust Destroyers. Again, it's another ledge unit for command protocols, +1 to the hit roll. I mean, again, this is a brutal combination again, you know, because now they're hitting on 2s. They've of course got the rerolls to the hit rolls, which is their data card ability. So the closest eligible enemy unit, you're going to get to reroll your hit rolls over 1. And if they're on an objective, it's all the hit rolls. But remember, this Locust Lord also provides 5+ critical hit rolls for their lethal hits. So if you do have a full rerolls active, you could just reroll anything that isn't a 5 and a 6 if you want to get through the bigger and badder stuff. Stratagems that are useful to these guys in this combination is, well, first of all, Protocol of Sunstorm is nice for assaults. So you're going to be moving, advancing, and still firing. You've got the Protocol of Vengeful Stars, which is going to be able to allow your unit to shoot out phase, which is really cool. And from the enhancements, the Veil of Darkness is quite a nice one to have to gain line of sight pretty much instantly. Pull them off in your opponent's end of your opponent's turn, bring them back in, basically deep striking them in. It sometimes does put them into danger, but you can literally eliminate or see virtually anything with true line of sight. Then the final combination within the Awakened Dynasty that I've gone for today is a Plasmanta with the Immortals. Now this works pretty similar to the Locust Destroyers because of the 5+ critical hit rolls from your Plasmanta, and that could access, well, it will access critical hit rolls on a 5+ for your sustained hits 2 with your Tesla, or your lethal hits with your Ghost Blasters. They're going to be now hitting on 2s with Command Protocol's ability. You've also got access to rerolls. In fact, that could be rerolls to hit as well with the Command Protocol of Conquering Tyrant. You're going to naturally reroll your wound rolls because of their in-house ability. Again, you can use the Protocol of Sunstorm to have Assault. That's if you've taken the Ghost Blasters, of course, because the Tesla Carbines already have Assault, so you won't need that there. Vengeful Stars, again, to shoot out of phase. Turn a Revenant to bring back the Plasmanta, and so on. You kind of get in the picture now. Undying Legions is actually a decent one here because the Immortals are only 1-win models. So having D3+1, you could potentially bring back 4 Necron Immortals just like that in a single phase. Remember, these stratagems can be used per phase. So you could use it in the fight phase, the shoot phase, whatever. Finally, they're also Battle Line, which is, you know, it's quite decent for some interactions with mission rules, secret missions as well. Anything, there's a lot of factors really in the current Pariah Nexus deck. Now this is of course due to change. I think it's early summer it's going to change to a new deck, but I would still imagine there is going to be some relation to Battle Line units. So that's the 5 from the Awakened Dynasty that I've gone with today, the best combinations. If you've got anything different, let me know down below. Okay, next we're going to move into the Hypercrypt Legion. I used to use this one before it got nerfed to crap, but it's still okay. It's still a pretty reasonable detachment to use. First one of my MVPs of this edition, Hexmark Destroyers. Love these guys, as you probably know if you've been a long-term follower of this channel. You know I love a Hexmark Destroyer. Lone Operative alongside Deep Strike is absolutely magical. Absolutely magical, especially in this detachment because you can bring them up, put them down, bring them up, put them down again. Remember, you're going to be taking them off on your opponent's turn, and then in your command phase while they're off the board, you're going to get to see your cards, and then you can act on what card you've got, and you've got the units to do it, not only with the Deep Strike ability, but lone op, so they can't necessarily be targetable, maybe even from Overwatch. If you've got a 24-inch Overwatch, doesn't matter, you need to be within 12 with lone op. But even in the opponent's shooting phase, they may not necessarily be able to see them at all, so lone op. Only 75 points, which is pretty cheap to be scoring all the secondaries and potentially some primaries too. I mean, the unique abilities that a Hexmark has, I'm not that fussed about. I mean, the free Overwatch, I do use it. I do love a good Overwatch, but the abilities in general are not the reason why I'm taking the Hexmark. It's purely the Deep Strike and the lone op. That's the first one. Second one, kind of on a similar vein here, it's the Deathmarks. Deathmarks have also got Deep Strike, but they trade in Lone Up for their sniper rifles with precision. So there's only, in my opinion, there's two reasons why you would take Deathmarks over a Hexmark. Reason number one is you've only got 65 points spare, not 75 points, so you kind of have to go for Deathmarks because you're just not good enough for a Hexmark destroyer. And number two, maybe you've got too many characters within your list and you don't want to be open to fixed secondaries assassination. Otherwise, you could just go with Hexmark. I mean, potentially go with both. Why not? Doesn't harm us. We can still be doing a lot of Deep Strike there. Doing it without Lone Up, though, is a little bit more dangerous. But they do have precision, so you can swap up their role within the game and start sniping out characters that are leading units. But yeah, you really want them doing secondaries, though, for me. That's for, behind enemy lines, established locust, and so on. Number 3 in this detachment is Doomsday Arcs. Did go up in points to 200 points not that long ago. I still think it's good value. We've got strength 18 cannons. Point for points, I'd probably say this is our best unit, to be honest. Right now, 200 points. I don't like saying this out loud, but it's still cheap. They're pretty resilient with toughness 9. They've got the in-1 save, 14 wounds. A decent amount of sidearms with the Gauss Flayers to take off the smaller stuff with rapid fire on top of that. But in the Hypercrypt, they're super nice because you can literally throw them up the battlefield. And I mean, I used to do this quite a lot, in fact. End of last year, I was doing this all the time. Hyperphasing them out. Cosmic Precision them back into play. That effectively gives them Deep Strike. It's no longer a 3-inch thing anymore, it's a 6-inch now. But I used to throw them back in. You've got line of sight. Yes, you've lost heavy for a turn. Yes, you've lost devastating wounds for a turn. But now you've got a fairly resilient model that has true line of sight on pretty much anything it wants. And your opponent has no choice but to deal with it. They have to deal with it. It's in maybe their deployment zone or it's in a vital area of the battlefield. But that's kind of where I like to go with this. I mean, they also will aid with things like behind enemy lines. If you've gone fixed maybe with established locus and behind enemy lines, this is a great tactic. Just throw it in there with a Hexmark destroyer behind it, so the Hexmark can't even be charged if you've got the corner space. And just away you go. You're just firing, forcing them back. They're not going to progress onto the no man's land because they've got to deal with the Doomsday Arc. That is quite resilient. Number 4, I'm not sure how I feel about this one, but I think I have to put this in. It's the Monolith. I'm personally not a fan of the Monolith. I'm not a fan. But the majority of the stratagems do relate to a Necron's Monolith. So I think we should include it as the best unit, or one of the best units within this detachment. The 4+ invulnerable save stratagem in particular is a real good one to have. It's ultra good, in fact, because this thing does Deep Strike. It does Deep Strike. You want it to have a bit more of a resiliency factor. It's very similar to the Doomsday Arcs that we mentioned earlier. Maybe you can throw this thing into the enemy quarters, give it an in-run save every phase if you can. Obviously that becomes quite pricey with CP, but that's what they're there for, to spend them. The monoliths do pack a decent punch in quite a lot of phases as well. The shooting phase and the fight phase, of course. They do fight pretty well. And they of course shoot, especially with the death rays, they're pretty decent. I find the Eternity Gate can lead to some real interesting tactics. Bringing in a lot of battle line units here and there, or you've got stratagem to bring in infantry units here and there. You've also got Cosmic Precision to help you out, bringing more units nearby, so you can literally create a new castle that isn't even in your own deployment zone. It could be completely the other side of the board. So there is some interesting tactics that you can use with a Monolith, but a lot of the stratagems do relate to this unit. Then on to the 5th one in this list. Well, I've put Locust Destroyers, but it's meant to say Locust Destroyers with the Locust Lord. I just had the big font on this bit, didn't want to change it. But yeah, Locust Destroyers, Locust Lord, we already know about the critical hits on a 5+, we've already mentioned that earlier on in this video. It's going to apply to their lethal weapons. Now there's a neat enhancement in this detachment, which is called, it's eluded me now, I can't remember the name of it. It's the one that gives them full rerolls when they enter the board. I think it's Horizon Tyrant, that rings a bell. As soon as they enter the battlefield, full rerolls to hit. They're going to be hitting on 3s, but now they're fully re-rolling. And yes, their own ability does allow them to re-roll stuff anyway, but now you've got different targets. So you could use it with this Locust Lord here. You're going to be fishing for lethals again with 5+s. So if you do have full rerolls, you may as well reroll them all. But yeah, you can hyperphase them out, bring them in off a table edge in your next moon phase, or use Cosmic Precision if you really want to get true line of sight on a target, but that is probably suicidal. But there, that is a decent tactic, and I think these guys are decent, so they're going to go in this list today for me. So that's the Hypercrypt Legion all done. Again, if you don't agree, or if you have different opinions and options and answers, let me know down below. Okay, on to the third detachment. We've got the Canoptek Court. So I do sometimes dabble in the Canoptek Court. It's a nice, easy, pick-me-up kind of game because the list pretty much builds itself. You don't have to spend hours and hours, masterminding a certain list. It kind of does it for you, doesn't it? Everything that is in this list there's only a few things that you can really change. The first one is the Canoptek Doomstalker. Of course, you're going to have 3 of these. You just have to. Great anti-tank vehicles. They tend to guard our home deployment zone, which means they're always going to be within our power matrix, so they're always re-rolling the hit rolls, which is nice. They're only 145 points at the moment, which I think is decent for a damage dealer in terms of points anyway. In other detachments, it's probably not so much worth it. You may as well get a Doomsday Arc, but in the Canoptek Court, full re-rolls, definitely worth it. Definitely worth it. You've got access to heavy, of course, if they stay still. But those Doomsday Blasters, okay, they don't have devastating wounds, but you're going to get a lot of shots, especially if you're re-rolling stuff. We've got a lot of reactionary stratagems with Canoptek stuff, such as the counter-temporal shift, where they can only be shot with an 18. That sometimes doesn't work when you've got 3 of them all near each other, because your opponent will just, okay, I'm not going to select that one anymore, I'm going to select that one instead, and it kind of doesn't work. If you've only got 1, then that will work. Then the other one is the reactive subroutines to allow them to move enemy units to get within 9 inches. Again, if you've got them all clumped together, all 3 of them, that might not work as well as you want it to, but if you've got them dotted about, yeah, that could work. It could avoid being charged, or even get them out of range as a target of a shooting attack. The second units I've gone with, the second combination, is the Technomancer with the Canoptek Wraiths, of course. Why wouldn't you ever take these in this detachment? One of my favourite units combinations, in fact, in the whole book, to be honest with you. In the Canoptek Court, they're going to be given loads of tools to be more aggressive because they're re-rolling, they're battling it out on the no man's land, clogging it down, hard to kill, plenty of OC, plenty of wounds, feel no pain, so they're tough as hell. And they're much more aggressive, as I mentioned, because they're re-rolling stuff. In the Awakened Dynasty, they're not really, okay, they've got the +1 to the hit roll, but here they're just re-rolling everything to hit. I think they're going to be fundamental in scoring your primaries in this detachment, because other units like your Doomstalker's not going to really venture out. You need some sort of units that can do and stick around. Do the primary, stick around in the no man's land, and these are perfect for it. If your Technomancer does get picked off with precision, which is the tactic nowadays, you just take away the Technomancer and they kind of crumble a little bit. You've got Curse of the Cryptek as an option, which is a stratagem. Army-wide now, all Canoptek units get a +1 to wound against the enemy unit that killed your Technomancer. So if you've got loads of Crypteks within this list, one of them being the Technomancer, you're going to have a decent amount of +1 to wound with your Doomstalkers maybe, more Canoptek Wraiths, and so on. So I think that's a really decent stratagem to have when a Technomancer does go down. They've also got access to the outer phase reanimation, which is what's it called? Suboptimal Facade. I believe it's when they get charged, you can reanimate. So you can have your normal reanimation protocols. If you get charged, you can reanimate. The Technomancer does the healing ability. There's a lot of reanimation going off, and you're probably going to have a reanimator as well in this list. Number 3, Plasmancer and Immortals. Again, they've come back again. Now this is a decent one because they're going to have full rerolls to hit in the power matrix. They're going to have a lot of OC, so they likely will hold those no man's land objectives if you're playing it that way. So full rerolls to hit in the power matrix, and they reroll win rolls as well. Ones or all win rolls if you're firing at enemy units on objectives. They do gain the Cryptek keyword, of course, because of the Plasmancer, which is why they do get those rerolls in the power matrix. We did mention it earlier, but the 5+ critical hit rolls apply to the unit because of the Plasmancer ability. So you're going to be aiming for 5+s. especially if you're using the Ghost Blasters with lethal. If you're using the Tesla, the maths kind of equals out if you just re-roll everything and that isn't a 5. But sometimes you see it and you're kind of short of a 5 or 2, so you can just throw them all again, I suppose. Solar Pulse is a stratagem that these guys can use to ignore cover, which is decent. And of course, Plasmancers have the Mortal Wound output as well, which I think is such an underrated ability. You know, the more I use it, the more I think the 75 points that you pay for the Plasmancer, just that ability alone, it's worth that. It's really good, and an average of 2 Mortal Wounds pretty much every turn is good. I think it's really good. Number 4 on this list is quite similar. It's the Immortals again, but I've taken the Plasmancer out and put Chronomancer in. I was debating whether to put something else here, like Warriors with Orokin maybe, but I think this is just a better option to have, the Chronomancer with the Immortals. Now they're a -1 to hit, at range and in melee. Good. They can move an additional 5 inches after firing. Very nice, gives them a little bit more speed, a little bit more flexibility with your secondaries and maybe getting onto your primaries, which is good. I mean, that gives them a potential move of 16 inches now, because if you've got the Tesla, that is, you could move, you're going to advance, you're going to shoot because they've got assault, and then you're going to move a further up to 5 inches. That's a potential of 16 inches. You're not going to charge, of course. But that's great when you've got a lot of OC moving around the board. And again, they're going to have all the same things we spoke about before. Solar Pulse, and so on. Number 5, this one's a bit left field, but it's the Catan Shard of the Nightbringer. One of the scariest units in the game, let alone our codex, in the entire game. When he gets into combat, it's pretty much curtains for your opponent's unit. Whatever's there is going to get slaughtered. Why he's so good in this particular detachment, though, why I've set him in my top 5 is, well, all the action happens in the no man's land. When you're playing the Canoptek Court, the power matrix, you're battling it out, because your opponent knows if the power matrix is unlocked, you're going to be much more powerful because you've got your rerolls on. Rather than rerolling ones, you're rerolling everything for Canoptek and Cryptek units. This feeds straight into the Nightbringer's hands because that's exactly where he wants to go. He's going to be going slowly, 6 inches, getting into the no man's land and just saying, you know what, let's do this, let's fight, because you're not fighting against my race and winning. The Nightbringer's here and he's going to save the day. Scything away, and he's also even got the gaze of, got an itchy nose, I've always got an itchy nose, it's hay fever season. You've got the Gaze of Death, which is the ranged attack. You've then got the big melee weapon. It's Sweep and Strike as well, which I really love. Now, if your opponent avoids the Nightbringer, well, not only have you now won on primaries because they're avoiding the No Man's Land primary objectives, but also everything in the No Man's Land is just so much more stronger because now your power matrix is open. So it's a really good unit battler, just like the Wraiths. And also this thing survives as well. You know all the drills. It's toughness 11, it's loads of wounds. It's got a great save, a great immune save, feel no pain save. It's got the halving damage ability. Decent in this detachment. Okay, so that's my 5 in the Canoptek Court. We're going to now move into the Obeisance Phalanx. I don't play the Obeisance Phalanx as much as I should. And I know it is a decent detachment. When it first came out with the Codex, I wasn't a fan. Now, I think it is much improved. It's just there's a lot more synergy with it. Anyway, I'm waffling. Let's get on to the first one. The Silent King. The Silent King is, of course, going in. Yes, he's pricey, but he packs a punch in all phases, doesn't he? He's resilient. He buffs all the units nearby within 6 inches. But why he works so well in this detachment is, well, simply due to how the tryout keyword works. He's going to get the potential +1 to the wound roll with the tryout keyword with the Worthy Foes detachment rule. So that's all of his weapons. The range weapons, it's going to be the melee weapons. He's got a lot of weapons. The Tricormineers, I mean, they're likely going to be 2s and 2s, but it could be 2s and 3s with the +1, makes 2s again anyway. So it's buffing everything and everyone within range, which is good. Also, the units that are within this detachment are also going to have those kind of abilities because of their keywords, whether it's Lich Guard or tryout units or Overlord units, noble units even. They're also going to have that +1 to the wound roll, so he can be using his ability. Maybe it's the rerolls of hit rolls or ones to hit, Rerolls of hit rolls of 1s to hit. Did that make sense? I don't think it did. In my head it did. It didn't. Rerolls of hits. Rerolls of 1s to hit. There we go. And rerolls of 1s to wound for all units within 6 inches, including himself. So now you're like, the Annihilation beams are 2s rerolling 1s, 2s rerolling 1s. That's good. It's really good. But all the units alongside him as well. It helps them. But the main thing I really love about the Silent King in this detachment is the -1 to damage stratagem, which is the nano assembly protocols. -1 to damage. But that -1 to damage stratagem is so good, especially with the Trichominiers, because they eat up a lot of damage. Your opponent has to overkill to kill just one model. But now it's a -1 to the damage as well. So even when it does start to get onto the Silent King, it's only -1, and then you start to reanimate and things. They're so undervalued or underestimated by your opponent. Number 2, let's go with Lich Guard. Lich Guard also interact with the detachment rule because they've got the Lich Guard keyword, obviously, so they can have the +1 to wound against a selected target for that turn. They also do want a noble in their unit for a -1 to wound them. And we've got plenty of options in our codex in terms of nobles. Now, they're not going to deal a massive amount of damage, especially if you're carrying the dispersion shields, which is the way most people use them. But they can be a decent objective holder with an in-run save, whilst the big guns do all the heavy lifting. Now, you could opt to go with the War Scythes. Not many do, not many are brave enough to do it because they don't have an in-run save. But running alongside the Silent King, and then you're re-rolling 1s maybe, and then you've got the +1 to wound with worthy foes. That can be quite devastating, but like I said, people tend to stick with the safer bet with the shields. Now, if you're going to be putting a leader within this unit, a non-epic hero that is, like an overlord, then they could carry the enhancement Warrior Noble, which is a -1 to hit them. So it could be a -1 to hit them, then a -1 to wound them, which is pretty nice. Or instead you could have an Eternal Conqueror, which is the full rerolls to the hit rolls. Options. Options are there. Options. Number 3, I've gone with a Trike Stalker. Another unit that's going to benefit from the +1 to the wound roll. This one has got a scout move. I believe it's 8 inches. I always get them mixed up with the Tomb Blades. I think Tomb Blades are 9 inches. Trike Stalkers are 8 inches. And they've got an in-run save. As a vehicle, all our vehicles pretty much have an in-run save apart from the Monolith, I believe. I bet I'm wrong on that. I bet there's one more somewhere. But yeah, an in-run save makes them fairly resilient for what their points cost is. The heat ray alone is okay, but when you've got a +1 to the wound roll with the Worthy Foes detachment roll, it becomes much improved. Much improved. There's stratagems that are available for a Trike Stalker as well. One in particular that I really like when it turns its OC from OC4 to OC7, used in your command phase, and that can of course swing an objective completely in your favour and you score. Job done. Number 4, I've gone with the Silent King's sort of in-house rival, which is Imhotep the Stormlord. He's a cool character and he's a noble, so you could stick him with the Lich Guard, although the Lich Guard already have the Lich Guard keyword, so you don't necessarily need it for the Worthy Foes detachment role, but they do need a noble in their unit, so maybe he's an option to put in there. You could also lead Immortals and Warriors if you want. Immortals are probably the one you're going to go for, and as soon as you put him in the unit with the Immortals, then all of a sudden the Immortals would actually have the noble keyword, so therefore the detachment role works with those Immortals. But Imhotep, the reason why you take him in this detachment is you're farming CP. You're going to go quite spendy with your CP, especially with the Silent King's -1 to damage stratagem. You want to be using that all the time, at least once a turn, and that's going to literally sink your CP. You're not going to have any. So having Imhotep provide payment for the Silent King's -1 to damage all game is good. And if the Silent King's alive and buffing everything and killing stuff, then that's your key to success in this detachment. Number 4, we just slightly alluded to it. It's the Immortals, but I've gone with the Overlord with the Translocation Shroud, and I've specifically gone with Tesla because of the certain combination that I like to use with a Chronomancer. I've not put the Chronomancer on the screen here, but it's mainly to do with the Overlord, but with the Chronomancer and the Overlord with the Translocation Shroud, you're going to move, you're going to auto-advance 6 inches through models and terrain and all that jazz, You're then going to fire because you've got assault with the Tesla. Then you're going to move an extra bit with the Chronomancer. It's a nice amount of movement there, moving a lot of OC about, and that Chronomancer of course provides a -1 to hit them as well, which is cool. But that's not what I'm mentioning today. I'm mainly going with the Overlord side of this because he's a noble, and that means the Immortals now have the noble keyword, so they're going to have the +1 to hit with worthy foes if you chose that right target. You've got the enhancement again. Eternal Conqueror could work with these guys for full rerolls to hit, and they already naturally have rerolls to wound. So if you're firing onto enemy units on an objective, you're going to have pretty much re-rolling everything to hit, to wound a lot. And what else we got? We got the +1 to wound, as we've said a few times now. I think their damage output is a lot better than you would realise. And you don't even need to take the Tesla. You could go with the Gorse, throw the Chronomancer out, you don't need it. You probably don't need... No, you know what, I might take that back, because this Overlord probably isn't valuable then. You might go with the other Overlord, because you can kit him out differently, because you're not going to be advancing if you've got the Gorse Blasters. So that's my top 5 in the Obeisance Phalanx. Let me know yours down below, and then we'll move on to the Annihilation Legion. Quite similar to the Canoptek Court, a lot of your list kind of creates itself, and the main bulk of your list is going to be Scorpion Lords with Scorpion Destroyers. Unlike the Awakened Dynasty, you don't want them in 3s, you want them in full blocks of 6. You want absolute carnage. You want 6 with a Lord, 6 with a Lord, 6 with a Lord. That's the way you should be going with this. Lethal hits, rerolls to hits, devastating wounds, mortal wounds on the charge, their infantry. So we've kind of already gone through this earlier in this video. But there's plenty of stratagems as well that can modify the damage, or modify the roll, sorry, and just be able to allow you to deal more damage. It's also worth adding the Soulless Reaper enhancement is a decent one to put on one of your Scorpion Lords, preventing enemy units from falling back, because then if they can't fall back, you've got their fight phase to then slap them up even more, and if you do finish them, then you're free to move in your own movement phase and get a new target. You don't be wasting fight phases with these guys. So that's an easy first pick of this list. Number 2, Flayed Ones. Probably another easy pick, to be honest with you. They relate to the detachment rule, which we didn't actually mention with the Scorpion Destroyers. You're going to get your re-rolls to your charge roll and potentially get +1 to the charge roll. I never look at that part because it's whatever, right? But the re-rollable charge is great. Now the best thing about Flayed Ones is they've got the natural Infiltrator's ability, which works as a great screen in the no man's land when you're doing your deployment, so enemy units can't be plonking within 9 inches, and also early game as well. Your opponent has to deal with them before getting towards the juicy stuff, which could be your Scorpion Destroyers. And if they're ignored, well, they're going to start scoring VP, because the likelihood is they're going to be on no man's land objectives, or they're just going to walk onto those objectives and start scoring primary as well as secondaries as well. So your opponent is going to use them and delete them, but that's fine. They're not deleting your bigger stuff. Sometimes they can. It's a disadvantage because your opponent can catapult off them, so they charge into them. If they get a big charge, they can kind of wrap round, and then they can consolidate off, and they've got a lot further up the board because of the charge move, up to 12 inches that they've just gained in movement, plus the 3-inch piling, plus the consolidation, and so on. Sometimes that works against you, but we're a melee faction. We've got a load of Scorpion Destroyers behind them, ready to jump and pounce on whatever's just killed them. So in a way, it's okay. The third on the list is the Ophidian Destroyers. Now, this is an excellent unit in most detachments, if not all of them really, due to their uppy and downy ability. Like, they're similar to Hypercrypt Legion. They're just up and down all the time, so you're going to get to see your cards and so on, and pop them back into play and do your secondaries. Now, unlike a Hexmark Destroyer, for example, or Deathmarks, these guys actually fight back pretty reasonable when needed. I tend to shy away from fighting with them. I'd rather them doing the secondary scoring, but if push comes to shove, you need to fight, or maybe you even need to charge with them if they're still on the battlefield. You can do it. They can fight, plenty of attacks, rerollable charge as well. Also, they're moving rapid, the 10 inches of movement, so if you do keep them on the battlefield, maybe they were holding a primary, so you didn't want to peel them off in your opponent's turn. You wanted to score in your command phase, so you've left them on, scored your points. You can now move 10 inches and let another friendly unit jump onto the objective that they've just left. and then maybe they go off and charge or do whatever. But yeah, great for secondaries, and if you need them to fight, they can do so. Fourth on the list, we've gone with the Locust Lord and the Locust Destroyers combination again. They've made a third appearance, I think, now in this video. We do need some artillery in this detachment. You can't just go full melee, you just get shot off the board. You need something to assist with your melee units. Now the main use for them is to oversee no man's land objectives. Anything that jumps onto those objectives, they can just go bang bang bang, get off, you're not holding that. And doing it from afar. Now what I like to do with these guys is I like to peel off a single wound off of enemy units. So I like to split fire them in this detachment. All you need to do is take off one wound. Just one wound, because you've got the Spore of Frailty stratagem. This is going to give a +1 to the hit roll for a unit that's targeting that unit that's not at full strength. So if you peeled off a wound off of an enemy unit, and then you go charging in with some Scorpion Destroyers, they've now got a +1 to their hit roll. If they're below half strength, it's a +1 to wound as well, but I don't care so much about that. I just want to get the +1 to hit. It's nice and easy. You've just got to take a single wound from afar, 24 inches away, and then this will be unlocked for your Scorpion Destroyers and whatever else. They've of course got the same old thing, lethal hits on a 5+ with the Locust Lord and all that jazz. And you also, in fact, get, from the detachment roll, get the extra AP on critical wound rolls. So that could be quite decent as well. That I believe would take them to -3. I'm going to double check because I always get that wrong. It is -3, I was right. It would take them to a -3 AP on a critical wound roll, which is decent. I mean, sometimes your opponent will claim cover, but it kind of negates that, doesn't it? Then the final one, I'm sticking with Locust. It's the Locust Heavy Destroyers. We do need some anti-tank in the list. You can't just go Scorpion Destroyers and Locust Destroyers. You need some heavy stuff. You could go with, you know, Doomsday Arcs and things, but I thought, why not bring the Locust Heavies in? You can take the Destructors and use that Spore of Frailty stratagem after the normal Locust Destroyers have shot. So that could give you a +1 to hit that way, but they do have heavy anyway, so you might not need it. Or you just focus down on the big bads. Alternatively, you've got the Exterminator weapons from your other alternative Locust Heavy Destroyers. They do carry value, but you're likely going to need a Locust Lord because your sustain hits 1 is on a 5+ now. That's where you get a lot of shots rolling off. So it does become more pricey because you need a Lord. Depends how you want to go about it. I just prefer having the standard Locust Destroyers do the anti-infantry kind of work. And they can in fact do more than that. They can do a lot of work to monsters and vehicles too. Whereas the Locust Heavies with the Exterminators tend to not do as much because of the lack of AP. So that's the 5 from the Annihilation Legion. And then we're finally on to the Starshatter Arsenal, which came out during Christmas. This one is my current go-to detachment. I think there's a lot of play in it. And the first unit I go for nowadays is the Silent King. The Silent King is great because all vehicles get assault. So he's got assault. Everything's got a +1 to hit against units that are on objectives. I mean, he hits on 2s anyway, but just as an overall rule, it's good. Especially if there's a -1 to hit modifier potentially. You're still going to be hitting on 2s. There's a lot of fast moving vehicles in this detachment anyway. So you can be flanking the Silent King, making max use of his buffs and bonuses. So a lot of things are now going to be hitting on 2s. A lot of these things are vehicles that will be invulnerable saves. So it's quite a resilient detachment. But for me, the Silent King is at the front and centre of this Starshatter Arsenal. He is the centrepiece, he's the pinpoint. And I've just found him incredible because he can just do everything, and even more so in this detachment. Now, one thing I always seem to forget though is Tank Shock. I'm awful at Tank Shock. I never ever remember it. I always remember like Overwatch and stuff, but Tank Shock I just always forget. However, I do remember the detachment stratagems in this detachment, like Merciless Reclamation for the +1 to the wound roll against enemy units on objectives. That's nasty. That's really nasty. You could put a -1 to be wounded with unyielding forms. You've got the Dimensional Tunnel to allow them to go through, to phase through terrain features and models. There's a lot of options there, and most of them go with the Silent King. Number 2, current MVP in my opinion, Doomsday Arcs. 200 point Doomsday Arc. You pretty much have 2 or 3 in any Starshatter list, in my opinion. It all depends on if you got the Silent King or not. If you got the Silent King, you only need 2 because you've got the Trichominiers and the Silent King is of course quite expensive. Everything's got assault, so you're just moving up the board rapidly here, advancing. Yes, you lose devastating wounds and heavy, but now you're going to be potentially re-rolling the 1s and a +1 to hit on enemy units on objectives. So you don't necessarily lose all those buffs that you would have had if you stayed still. You still don't get devastating wounds, of course, but having assault now gives you a better chance of getting line of sight. Damage 4 is pretty hefty, and you've got 2 of them with the Silent King. That's going to be a lot with all the buffs. It's a lot. Don't forget you've got the Endless Servitude stratagem as well to reanimate in the fight phase if needed, and that could apply to any vehicle. Now, the alternate to the Silent King is the Catacomb Command Barge, which I've also put in my list because a lot of people go this way. I started the detachment when I was playing it with the Command Barge, and I think I'm favouring the Silent King now. But if you did still want to go with the Command Barge, you 100% stick the enhancement on, the Dread Majesty. It creates like a mini Silent King out of him because he can now grant rerolls of 1s to hit and to wound for units within 6 as an aura, which is what the Silent King can do, but now you've not got the Tricommoniers and all the Silent King's weaponry, you've not got it anymore, and the 26 wounds in total. Now, if you are taking a Command Barge, then you're likely going to be taking 3 Doomsday Arcs because you can now afford it, because the Silent King is a whopping, 420, I think he is, off the top of my head. So you're going to take 3, which of course is a lot of firepower when you're re-rolling 1s with assault, +1 to hit on enemy units on objectives and so on. Whether you go with 2 and a Silent King or 3 and a Barge, either works fine, but they're definitely a mainstay in a lot of lists. Number 4, Triax Stalker. Another vehicle with the inbound save. You're going to gain assault again because it's a vehicle. It's going to be your first wave because of Scout. Whether it's 8 inch, I think it is 8 inch. You're going to have your Scout move. Your opponent now has to deal with that Stalker, because if they don't, it's going to score primaries and it's going to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. But if your opponent decides to deal with your Triax Stalker, it gives your Silent King and your Doomsday Arcs a little bit more time to float up the battlefield. Only takes a turn really, just to get up there unhindered, and then they can start popping off. You've got the reactive reposition stratagem, which I quite like. So if your Triax Stalker or any other vehicle really gets targeted, you can move up the battlefield or wherever really, you can make a movement. I like to move the Triax Stalkers even more forward after they've scouted. Let's say your opponent goes first, turn 1, they target the Stalker, and then you go, yep, thank you, I'm now going to move up even more. This is going to be up to D6. I think it started, when the detachment came out, I think vehicle just got a straight 6, but it did get nerfed to D6. But that's still fine. You could now be using your Triax Stalker to potentially block avenues or just get onto an objective that it might not quite have got onto yet, or stop your opponent from scoring and whatnot. So that's definitely useful. Then the final unit within this detachment, I've gone with the Canoptek Spider. I was on the fence with what to pick here because there's quite a few options, but I think the Spider is a real gem in the Starshatter Arsenal for many reasons. Number 1, they're vehicles, so they're going to gain assault. We like that. Number 2, they've got the Gloom Prism, so they're going to give vehicles a feel no pain save of a 6+, potentially a 5+ if it's mortal wounds. That will apply to any friendly though. So the Silent King and all of his Doomsday Arc buddies potentially have that benefit. If the Canoptek Spider is just behind them, feel no pain all round. We love that. The Spider is a little gem, I'm telling you. And number 3, the Spider is decent at range and in melee. And it's going to have a +1 to hit with the detachment rule. And if the Silent King's nearby again, or the Command Barge with the enhancement, you're going to be re-rolling 1s to hit, 1s to wound, and so on. So they are actually decent. But D, or 4, D, not 4, I can't remember if I was doing numbers or letters now. Let's go with D. What's great about them is your opponent is likely going to ignore them. In other detachments, I find that they just die instantly, but in this detachment, there's so many big things. There's the Silent King or the Barge. There's the Doomsday Arcs, there's the Triax Stalkers that have scouted up. The last thing your opponent is going to be looking at is that little Canoptek Spider with particle beamers. They're not going to get shot. So that means they can be open to be doing little actions. They can be a little action hero as well. So for this detachment, especially as we're lacking action monkeys, they could be the one. So that's my 5 for the Starshatter Arsenal. Again, if you agree or disagree, whatever you want, let me know down in the comments below. So yeah, that is the end of the video. Make sure you check the barrel of dice on your exits, and thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.